Welcome to Elephanta Insights. If you are interested in understanding world politics in a deeper and more serious way, this space is designed for you. Here we go beyond headlines and short-term news cycles to examine the ideas, institutions, strategies, and historical forces that shape international relations. Our focus is on clarity, depth, and thoughtful analysis. In the last lecture, we asked a deceptively simple question: what is international relations, and why is it so hard to define? We saw that international relations is not a fixed object out there in the world, it is something we construct, debate, and constantly reinterpret. But that leaves us with a much deeper puzzle. If international relations is just a way of looking at the world, then what exactly is the structure of that world? What are the basic building blocks that make global politics possible in the first place? That is exactly what we are going to unpack today. Think of this as the conceptual backbone of the entire discipline. If you truly understand today's lecture, every major theory, realism, liberalism, constructivism, will suddenly start making much more sense. Here is our roadmap. We will begin with the state, the central actor of world politics. Then move to sovereignty, the principle that gives states authority. Then to anarchy, the condition in which all states operate. And finally, we will bring it all together to understand how order is even possible in a world with no central authority. Let's begin. At the heart of international relations lies a very powerful idea. The state is the primary unit of world politics. But what exactly is a state? A state is not just a country on a map. It is a political organization that exercises authority over a defined territory and population. The sociologist Max Weber gave us one of the most influential definitions. He argued that a state is the entity that successfully claims a monopoly over the legitimate use of physical force within its territory. That sounds abstract, so let's simplify it. A state is the only actor that can make laws that people must follow. Enforce those laws through institutions like police and military. Decide on war, peace, and diplomacy. No corporation, no NGO, no international organization has this kind of authority. This is what makes the state structurally unique. Now, there are two important distinctions you must be very clear about. First, state versus nation. A nation is about shared identity, culture, language, history. A state is about political authority. Not all nations have states, and not all states contain just one nation. Second, state versus government. Governments change. Leaders come and go. But the state persists. So when we study international relations, we are not studying individual leaders, we are studying enduring political structures. And despite globalization, despite multinational corporations, despite digital networks, the state remains the central actor. But why? Because it controls territory, law, and organized force. And that brings us to the principle that gives the state its power. If the state is the actor, sovereignty is what gives it legitimacy. Sovereignty basically means supreme authority. But it operates in two dimensions. Internally, sovereignty means the state has ultimate authority over its own territory and population. Externally, it means that no other state has the right to interfere in its affairs. This creates a world of formally equal units, at least in principle. But here is where things get interesting. In reality, sovereignty is not as clean or absolute as it sounds. The political scientist Stephen Krasner famously described sovereignty as organized hypocrisy. Why? Because states constantly claim to respect sovereignty, while simultaneously violating it when it suits their interests. Interventions, coercion, economic pressure, these are all ways in which sovereignty gets compromised. Krasner breaks sovereignty into multiple dimensions. Domestic sovereignty, control within borders. Interdependence sovereignty, control over flows like trade, data, migration. Westphalian sovereignty, freedom from external interference. International legal sovereignty, recognition by other states. And here's the key insight. A state can have one form of sovereignty but lack another. So sovereignty is not a perfect shield, it is a flexible, often contested principle. And yet, despite all its contradictions, it remains the organizing logic of the international system. Which leads us to the most important structural condition of all. Now we arrive at one of the most misunderstood concepts in international relations: anarchy. When people hear this word, they think chaos, disorder, collapse. But in IR, anarchy has a very specific meaning. It simply means there is no central authority above states, no world government, no global police, no ultimate decision maker. Inside a state, there is hierarchy, someone is in charge. Outside the state, there is no such hierarchy. This creates what scholars call a self-help system. States cannot rely on anyone else for survival. They must ensure their own security. And this leads to one of the most important dynamics in world politics, the security dilemma. Imagine one state builds up its military purely for defense. Other states cannot be sure of its intentions. So they respond by increasing their own military power. Now everyone feels less secure even though no one originally intended conflict. This is the tragedy of anarchy. And this is why power, survival, and strategic calculation become so central in international relations. Kenneth Waltz, a key theorist, argued that under anarchy, all states perform similar basic functions. What differentiates them is their power. And the distribution of that power shapes the entire system. So whether the world is dominated by one power, two powers, or many powers, this structure deeply affects global stability. But here is the paradox. If there is no central authority, why isn't the world in constant chaos? That brings us to our final part. This is where international relations becomes truly fascinating. Even in an anarchic world, we still observe patterns, rules, and stability. So how is order possible? The scholar Hedley gives us a powerful answer. He argues that states don't just form a system, they form a society. An international system exists when states interact and affect each other. But an international society exists when they share rules, norms, and institutions. In other words, states recognize that cooperation even in a competitive environment is necessary. Bull identifies key institutions that sustain this order. Balance of power prevents domination by any single state. International law creates predictability. Diplomacy enables communication and negotiation. War, paradoxically, can restore balance when regulated. Great powers play a special role in maintaining stability. And underlying all of this are three fundamental goals of social order: security against violence, keeping of promises, stability of possession. Without these, no society, domestic or international, can function. But here's the catch. Inside a state, these goals are enforced by institutions. In the international system, they are maintained through practice, negotiation, and power. There is no guarantee. Order is always fragile. So now, let's step back and connect everything. International relations begins where domestic sovereignty ends. It is a world of states as primary actors, sovereignty as the organizing principle, anarchy as the structural condition. And yet, despite the absence of a global authority, states somehow manage to create order, rules, and cooperation. This is the central puzzle of the discipline. How do states survive, compete, and cooperate in a system with no one in charge? And more importantly, what determines whether this system becomes stable or collapses into conflict? That is exactly what we are going to explore in the next lecture. In the next video, we will look at international relations from three different perspectives: the system as a whole, the state as an actor, and the individual decision-makers who shape events from within. This will help us understand not only how world politics is structured, but also how and why decisions are made at different levels. If you are serious about understanding geopolitics, not just events, but the structure behind them, this series is designed for you. So if you found this valuable, subscribe to Elephanta Insights, and stay with the journey. Because from here onward, things start getting even more interesting. See you in the next video.